A new consciousness is developing which sees the Earth as a single organism and recognizes that an organism at war with itself is doomed. We are one planet.
Y'all, I'm making a second episode of one of my shows. I made several intros to shows, and I think this is the first time I've made a second one, not counting two-parters. Say, you should go watch those videos. You'll be part of an elite group. Elite just means very few in this case. In any case, you're watching this video now, which is an episode of Relevant Song Review. I have a ton of ideas for political-ish, philosophical-esque, social commentary-y songs to do video explications on, including a suite of compositions by the legendary singer-songwriter we'll be discussing today, Pete Seeger. And I did a ton of poetry explications in college, in standard written essay format, of course, just taking a poem, breaking it down in various ways, line by line. Now, you may have done or at least heard of an explication elsewhere before, but did you know that the word comes from the Latin word for to unfold? That's kind of cool, right? And poetry is famously opaque and multi-layered and ambiguous and all that shit. So it needs to be unfolded. Speaking of words, this song has them. While it's considered a Pete Seeger joint, he actually didn't write the lyrics to this one. My understanding has always been that the words to From Way Up Here come from a poem by Malvina Reynolds, though they are shifted around and tweaked ever so slightly in Seeger's song. Absolutely no changes of any consequence, though. You see, these songs are pretty simple. My Fixed Frequencies video was 30 minutes long or whatever out of necessity. It's a dense song full of metaphors, irony, references, many of them somewhat obscure to me, even a line or two in non-English phrases. From Way Up Here is, to be sure, quite poetic, but there's very little consequential ambiguity or opaque, multi-layered language. Seeger was a properly progressive, you might even call him a leftist folk singer-songwriter who made a bunch of protest music and other stuff. I'll cover his biography in a later video of this suite. Okay, let's dive in with my chopped up cover. From way up here, the earth looks very small. It's just a little ball of rock and sea and sand, no bigger than my hand. From way up here, the earth looks very small. They shouldn't fight it all down there upon that little sphere.
If you want to hear my whole cover and or watch the whole lyric video, it is the last upload I made before this video. Linked in the description.
So we open up with an interesting perspective, which is really what this song is all about, perspective. This is what we in the biz call a framing device. Without context, the first verse seems like it could be from the perspective of an astronaut, an alien, or maybe some sort of god or otherwise supernatural being. A little context might clear things up. This song was released in 1962, before a photo of the Earth had ever been taken from space. Nowadays, we take for granted that we have access to photos of the Earth in its entirety. But for all of human history, up until 60 years ago or whatever it was, no human had ever seen a photo of the entire Earth. But humans had recently gone to space for the first time. There's a helpful and pretty interesting timeline of photos of Earth taken from space on Wikipedia. From what I'm seeing here, there had been a couple of little teases at this point, blurry, partial, black and white photos of Earth from space, which I'm sure was mind-blowing at the time. I mean, can you imagine? But the first full disk photo of this planet we live on, a photo of the entire Earth suspended in empty space, wasn't taken until May 30th, 1966. We can thank the Soviets for this admittedly not very good image, but the quality starts to improve pretty rapidly after this. Kind of insane that 3 years after this photo was taken, human beings walked on the moon for the first time. I've always heard that these full disc images becoming available to the public is in large part responsible for the environmental movement. You know, seeing the Earth from that perspective sort of drove home how finite our planet is or whatever. Is that true? I don't know. From my tiny bit of research, it seems like it didn't spawn modern environmentalism exactly, but it encouraged a lot of people to go into that very important subcategory of political activism. However true it is, it's a powerful metaphor for this song's metaphor. This song was released and this poem written during a time between humans first sending things and themselves into space and the first whole Earth photo being released. Actually, now that I'm looking at this more closely, Malvina Reynolds may have written the music to this. Some sources say Seeger based the song on a poem she wrote, while others seem to indicate that it was a collaboration of some kind. In any case, Reynolds and Seeger were friends, and you might actually recognize another song that she wrote in 1962 and Pete Seeger popularized in 1963, Little Boxes. It was the theme song to that show Weeds, sort of a critique of the then relatively new concept of the atomized, uniform suburbs that had been springing up all over the US after World War II, which I guess is kinda also what Weeds is about. I remember liking that show, but now that I'm thinking about it, it might have been terrible. Malvina Reynolds was a powerhouse of a folk singer and songwriter, and poet apparently. Sort of an elder stateswoman to younger folk singers in the 1960s. Reynolds was born in 1900. It's difficult to understate how significant and jarring countless changes she experienced throughout her life must have been. Perhaps, having seen so much pointless death and destruction during the first half of the 20th century, she had some hope that humanity taking to space would have some sort of uniting influence. That having our perspective fundamentally altered in such a profound way would put into stark relief how absurd and stupid our petty squabbles among each other are here on Earth. It's not too hard to imagine having some molecule of hope for humanity during this point in history, however unjustified it may have turned out to be. You can interpret the perspective multiple ways. It doesn't really matter who the speaker is exactly. I lean towards ascribing the words to a Greek god-style deity for whatever reason, someone just observing and commenting upon the affairs of Earth without presuming some sort of intervention, but it could just as easily be an astronaut from Earth seeing the planet as a whole for the first time, amazed that the entire everything is no bigger than her hand. And that might be a little closer to what Reynolds had in mind. After all, the speaker establishes a tone of maybe somewhat detached surprise with the opening line, implicitly contrasting the view from way up here with the view from way down there. So far, the Earth looks small from space, and seeing it from that perspective makes wars and politics and racism and all that crap seem pointless and even more tragic than normal in a sense. Now we get to the song's chorus, and even though I'm trying to focus mostly on the lyrics with these videos, we've got to talk about the music here. Now, I'm no expert on music theory, but I'll try and quickly explain for the layperson what's interesting and fairly unique about this song's structure. My version, the one I'm using in this video, is in A minor, and the standard move in pop, rock, and indeed much of folk music for seamlessly shifting between a minor and a major key is to use the relative minor and major, which in this case would be C major. I should probably demonstrate. Let's see, what's the song this happens in? Relative major and minor, a lot of them. I'll just make one up. Singing in A minor, it feels really sad, or contemplative or something like that. And now I'm moving to the major key, and it's like I'm flying on the sun, and I'm happy now again. Now I'm going back to the minor key. This is super common in music. The song starts in a sadder or more pensive or maybe angrier sounding minor key, then they shift to that minor key's relative major in the chorus to make the chorus sound happier, more triumphant, and probably most importantly, fun to sing along with. Now you use the minor with the major because it shares all the same chords. They're just sort of anchored differently. This makes it more seamless and natural feeling to transition from minor to major keys. Now from way up here, it goes from minor in the verse to major in the choruses, but it doesn't use the relative major of A minor, which would be C major. It momentarily switches to and this is where the limitations of my surface level pop music based understanding of music theory are going to become apparent, but I believe it switches to the parallel minor, which is to say it goes from the key of A minor to the key of A major. But crucially, I think, it never lands on the A major chord. It behaves as if it's going to, then the vocal goes up to a note that guides it back to A minor. It made figuring out this song kind of difficult for me. I still don't actually quite understand how it makes that feel like it makes sense. When it switches to that major key in the chorus, the song manages to keep its eerie feel without going into a sing-song sort of deal. Hey, that rhymed. Here's what it sounds like in the original, or as close to the original as I could manage. If you really want to hear it super well done, definitely go listen to one of Pete Seeger's versions.
Their time is short, a life is just a day. You'd think they'd find a way get along and fill their days with song.
Now contrast that with what it might sound like with a more standard or traditional minor to relative major transition.
Upon that little sphere, the time is short, a life is just a day, and think they'd find a way.
Okay, so I goofed that up a little bit, but it just doesn't work, right? It sounds odd because it sounds kind of normal. A sing-songy chorus doesn't fit the song, but it still kind of has one. It's just that it doesn't feel totally natural. Something feels off about it, which is intentional, I think. It's an eerie song, which brings me to the whistling. Now, I'm no super whistler, as I think what was that guy's name? Holden Caulfield says the phrase super whistler in Catcher in the Rye at some point, and for some reason that's always stuck with me. Anyway, I tried to recreate the whistling as best I could, but it's super eerie in Pete Seeger's versions of the song in a way that I'm not sure I'm capturing. Good on him for incorporating a whistling solo into a song. You really do have to be a super whistler to make that work. I would consider that very risky, giving yourself the task of whistling every time you perform this song live, no matter how dry your mouth is at this point. But that's a side note, of course, not a tangent. If you look around for comments, write-ups, or whatever about this song, you'll see the word haunting come up over and over. And I think it's appropriate here. I think the whistling, the weird chord structure, the lyrics, the performance, everything adds up to an eerie, creepy, haunting experience. In one word, I think that ethereal describes this song very well. It's dreamlike, unanchored, adrift. Feels very spacey, trippy, whatever. And this ethereality, this odd feeling of being unmoored, gives us this abstract feeling of sadness, or it does me anyway. It's a sad song about a pretty abstract concept, and that feeling of estrangement that so often accompanies science fiction, thanks Darko Subin, lends itself to a thought-provoking sense of otherness. And I think one major intended effect here is to evoke feelings and thoughts that can get us meditating about perspective in deeper ways. Much like the deity or astronaut or alien or whatever in this song ruminates on the goings-on down there. Okay, I'll play the rest of my version of the song now.
their time is short, a life is just a day, must be some better way to use the time that runs among the distant suns. From way up here, the earth is just a ball, a precious little ball, so small, so precious and so dear.
So that was mostly a retread of the ideas and exact words from the rest of the song, but I have to include one more comment on the lyrics before I sum things up. How about the line, "must be some better way to use the time that runs among the distant suns"? It's just beautiful, and I guess it's kind of what makes me picture a deity or some otherworldly thing narrating the song. Like they have this omniscience or understanding of time that puts into perspective how brief and fleeting a human life is, or something like that. I'll close by discussing 3 things this song makes me think of. Whenever I hear or see someone who cares about shifting demographics, or the fact that eventually white people will be a minority, which, by the way, is literally the only thing that can happen, given how we've defined whiteness as a principally exclusionary category, but that's neither here nor there. I try to remind myself that people like that are operating from a racist, but more pertinently narrow perspective. Like, eventually all of humanity will go extinct, and a good while after that, the Earth will no longer be able to support life at all. So Why lose sleep over changes like this? I mean, what difference does it make if white people go extinct through a multi-generational process of mixing in non-white people, or if we manage to hang on and stay white? Don't clip that last clause. Actually, I'm fine with it if you clip things out of context and get me canceled, because I really want to go on Joe Rogan, and that seems to be the ticket onto that show. But what difference does it make if white people go extinct through mixing in non-white people, or if white people hang on and manage to stay white until the sun swells up and destroys all life? It's pointless, futile, racist, ethnocentric, and has nothing to do with human beings' happiness and flourishing now or ever. And again, it's obviously very, very racist too. I just think a little perspective like what's described in this song could be illuminating for some of these Carlsonites and whatnot. Maybe I'm naive, but this is the sort of abstract thing that art is uniquely equipped to address. The second thing I'll mention and recommend is Mark Twain's final novel, The Mysterious Stranger. I should definitely do a video about that short story turned book sometime, but to give purely practical advice, go for the longer version that's based off his final draft, not the 100-page story some editors cobbled together in the 30s or something. It explores related concepts of seeing humanity from high up, and it's just a really weird and fascinating book. I'm linking a video in the description of this claymation Mark Twain movie that animated elements of various of his famous stories, in which something in the realm of what I'm talking about is depicted. It's super weird and creepy. One of those videos that got passed around in the early-ish internet days, usually in the context of, can you believe they made this for children? And check it out, it rules. And finally, this video would definitely be incomplete without mentioning Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot speech, also linked in the description. It's one of the best pieces of television ever produced, and suffice it to say that it's all about this concept of seeing Earth from space. In that case, as a tiny blue speck taken from beyond the moon and way out there in the late 70s by one of the Voyager probes, which just a few years ago left our solar system and is now traveling through interstellar space. Sort of. I think it's still in the sun's sphere of influence for decades or centuries or some crap, but it'll keep moving away from our solar system forever until it runs into something, I guess, which is not likely to happen, I don't think. Unrelated, Star Trek the Motion Picture is really good, so go check it out. Some people don't like it because they say it's too slow. The filmmaking is definitely more inspired by 2001: A Space Odyssey than Star Wars, as pretty much all science fiction was trying to mimic after that in the 80s. Not that Star Wars is science fiction. I know, it's space opera fantasy crap. All right, time to wrap this thing up. So I guess this is going to be part one of a 3-part suite. I can't be making 90-minute video essays like ContraPoints and Heich Bomagoy and all of them. My British accent. Stay tuned for my next video essay, in which I'll probably be breaking down Pete Seeger's classic protest anthem, What Did You Learn in School Today? That'll definitely be the next one I do in this little suite here. I stream myself on Twitch with some frequency, so go follow me on there, and on all the other crap. I'm Haas_Bossman on Twitter, Instagram, Twit, which is short for Twitch, and Patreon, or Haas Bossman with no underscore on YouTube. Wait, I don't need to tell you my YouTube address. Just please subscribe and like and comment and all that. Even if you hated this video, just help me out. I mean, what the hell did I ever do to you? I don't deserve your like, comment, subscription, bell click, and sharing of this video just because it isn't any good. Frankly, I'm very offended, and I hope you learned some manners. Oh, subscribe to Breadsheet and visit www.haas.fun for all your Haas needs. Alrighty, love ya. Bye. Mwah. Yo, Haas from the future here. These dadgum vidges take so long to make, I always have stuff I want to add in later when I'm editing, so here's the sign-off, all entangled with some final turds of wisdom on this song. It occurred to me when I first had the idea to do a relevant song review on From Way Up Here that some folks might find it a little too basic, like too simplistic maybe, but that's a huge part of the song's appeal for me. I just love the simplicity of these lyrics, and that last verse, the original Malvina Reynolds line is, "The earth is just a ball, a precious little ball, so small, so precious and so dear," which is the line that I used. She really was a radical, Miss Reynolds. She did something in this verse that any beginning writing teacher would tell them to never do. Repeat the word precious 5 words apart from one another. But old Petey Sieg's version changes it to so beautiful and dear. I obviously see why he might have changed it, but I kind of like Malvina's version better. It's like this god or alien speaker in the song/poem is sort of musing, seems a little aimlessly. She's like kind of bummed out, and it's making her repeat herself as she sort of, pardon the pun, but her vocabulary kind of degrades as she spaces out. I know this is a YouTuber thing, trying to up engagement by asking for comments, but I genuinely love to hear others' thoughts in these comments, like on what this song is about, any other interpretations. The engagement thing would be a bonus, though.